We will enslave or crush all of mankind's cities to pave the way for our Lord's inevitable victory over his progeny. All we do is for Lord Torruk, glorious dragonfather, master of all. In his name we unleash torment eternal, and by his power, death is denied. Lich Lord Terminus.
Military of the Cryxian Empire. Claws of the Dragonfather. For centuries, outsiders have had little awareness of the vast power of the nightmare empire of Cryx. To the mainland nations, Cryx seemed a remote and mysterious threat, a haven for criminals and undead horrors, with few witnesses to verify the atrocities ascribed to them. The dragon god Torruk created this empire to serve his needs and spent over a millennium shaping it into a weapon that could extend his reach across the continent. Mainlanders avoided these islands, and they have had little contact with Cryxians beyond brutal clashes with raiding pirates and the reaving dead. Survivors spoke of dread vessels that blazed with an unholy and unquenchable fire, and of strange, soul-burning machines that emerged from the waves to slaughter the unwary before disappearing back into the mists. Only in the last decade have mainlanders come to learn of the scope of the armed forces serving the Nightmare Empire. Across Western Immoren, armies of the dead emerged to plague the living, having lain in wait just beneath the notice of their many enemies. Only by throwing aside ancient rivalries and working together in 609 did the Iron Kingdoms avoid total annihilation under a crushing wave of Cryxian nightmares. Even then, they merely dispersed the forces of Cryx, and Cryxians still lurk in the shadows in countless numbers. Lord Torruk desires only to eradicate his progeny, and the armies of Cryx exist only to serve the Dragonfather. Coastal raids are but deceptions to mask greater troop movements and incursions by which Torruk plants his minions deep within the mainland. Once the nations of mortals have fallen, Torruk will drag all other dragons, his spawn, from their hiding places to devour them. Torruk, the Dragonfather. In Cryx, only one master reigns supreme, Lord Torruk, the Dragonfather. An entity both sovereign and divine, he is described by his faithful as the first true god of Can. All who dwell in Cryx do so at Torruk's sufferance, and no other entity on Can is more feared than him. The Church of Torruk teaches that long before the Nightmare Empire or even the mortal nations came into being, when the world was still young and not yet fully formed, Torruk soared alone over a lifeless world for an almost indeterminable epoch of isolation. Eventually, life arose, and Torruk observed teeming hordes of short-lived creatures, crawling, swimming, and flying below him. He was seized by the urge to create other dragons, to spawn his own progeny, though he did not reproduce the same way nature does, but rather he carved pieces from his otherwise imperishable Athak, the crystalline heart that formed the core of his divinity. Each shard became a single dragon. These great beings proved more willful than Torruk had anticipated, however, defying their father and turning upon their own creator. Since then, Torruk has sought to undo his creations by consuming each dragon in turn, a great hunt that has stretched over 6 millennia. For the immortal lords of Cryx who serve him directly, no other goal takes precedence over this pursuit. Torruk created the Nightmare Empire 16 centuries ago, after an alliance of the dragons drove him from the mainland, and he dedicated the ever-expanding and evolving armies of Cryx to eventually restoring his Athak to wholeness through the annihilation of his dragon children. No simple task, however. This ultimate goal requires innumerable bloody clashes with the mainland nations and other rival powers. Torruk is a font of seemingly limitless power, the blackened heart of an empire built on necromantic principles deriving from his supremely potent blight. These radiant energies seep from his Athak and spread out across hundreds of miles, affecting all that it touches. It is by Torruk's blight that the dead are made to rise again, and the chosen servants of Torruk receive unparalleled occultic power and become immortal, freed from the clutches of the lesser gods, most of whom have been banished to Yurkan, with no longer the ability to manifest on Kan itself. Torruk's mind is vast and alien, occupied with higher matters beyond mortal reckoning. He takes no interest in the countless quadranian tasks required for the smooth running of his empire. Such minutiae he leaves to the 12 Lich lords he created to lead in his stead, each responsible for their own individual dominions. They, in turn, delegate tasks to their own chosen lieutenants, many of them iron liches, wraiths, or other self-willed undead. Due to his imperishable nature, Torruk's concept of time is quite unlike that of mortals, and his plans sometimes unfold on a protracted timeline. In 609, escalating battles amongst the competing powers distracted the dragons from their vigil against their father, and culminated in a clash over the skies over the Wormwall Mountains. Torruk took wing for the first time in centuries, seizing an opportunity to recover what he had lost. The dragonfather succeeded in feasting on the athank of the dragon Charsong, and wounded most of the others before each side retreated. Torruk did not emerge unscathed from the battles of the immortals, and withdrew to Skeld to recuperate and plot his next move. The Lich Lords are under considerable pressure to secure another great victory as soon as possible. These undead lords fear that Torruk's festering wounds have left the Empire vulnerable, though none dare speak such blasphemies aloud. Torruk's Citadel and the Black Temple. The Dragonfather dwells in a great citadel ornamented with metal spires resembling grasping claws, attended by his priests and the Lich Lords. Beneath the citadel lies the Black Temple, the center of Torruk's worship, where his undead clergy gather at the direction of Lich Lord Divinitus to chant obeisances to the god of Kan. Mainland faiths do not accept Torruk's claim of primacy or divinity, but it remains an unquestioned fact in the island empire. To suggest otherwise is to invite retaliation from the merciless blighted priests of the church itself. The greatest of Torruk's clergy are undead, but the largest number are still alive, though horribly rotted from intense blight. Their flesh undergoes a perpetual cycle of decay, rot, and regeneration, sprouting the disfiguring cancerous deformities on their skin. The clergy of the Black Temple pays occasional visits to every major community in Cryx, where they serve as the eyes and ears of Divinitus himself, enforcing orthodoxy and rooting out those who speak ill of the Dragonfather. They also ensure Cryxian funeral services harvest useful souls and cadavers for use as raw materials in the necrofactorums of Skell. Such corpses are sometimes referred to as the tithe of the Black Temple. All priests periodically return to the Black Temple, which contains the strongest concentration of dragon blight on Kan. There, the priests receive a special communion, a solution containing drops of Torruk's own blood, which causes their flesh to fester and distort. Priests consider this affliction a blessing and savor the revulsions their horrified state invokes in those brought before them. The aura of their blight is strong enough to kill mortals brought in close proximity for extended exposure. All living priests consider their exalted warning a necessary step before the immortal undeath the worthy receive as a reward for faithful service. Shortly before death, they are taught torruk, a sacred language of Lord Torruk, and a tongue almost unknown except amongst the dragons. Most priests dwell within the Cryxian Empire, but some have ventured out into the mainland to establish small, covert cults to spread the word of the Dragonfather. They periodically return for their sacred communion, or have the blessed liquid smuggled to them. Lich Lord Divinius considers the few cults on Torruk in the Iron Kingdoms an experiment. They might help prepare the way for the acceptance of Torruk's inevitable victory over all life, but even if not, they provide a convenient source for cadavers and information. The Lich Lords of the Cryx. The Lich Lords are powerful, immortal, undead generals who weave cunning strategies that span centuries, of a scope inconceivable to mortal minds. These liches were created to do the bidding of Lord Torruk, the dragonfather, though they were often preoccupied with their own agendas. So long as the Empire and its armies answer his will, the dragonfather affords them considerable latitude. Torruk personally selected each of these Lich Lords to command his armies and govern his empire, but he shows little interest in scrutinizing their deeds. Some have held dominion for centuries, while others more than a millennium, though the significant turmoil of the last several years has led to the loss of 2 and the replacement of 1. At present, only 11 of the original 12 seats have been filled. The origins of the first Lich Lords can be traced back to the ancient pirate kings, 14 in number, who ruled over the old scarred islands before Torruk's arrival, squabbling over their petty little island domains. These proud kings initially refused Torruk when he demanded their obedience, and so the Dragonfather orchestrated a demonstration of his power. Torruk chose the notorious pirate captain Rengrave of the Archimedes as his emissary. Torruk's fiery breath transformed him and his crew into revenants, indestructible specters that dwelled aboard the blackened ship that they crewed in life. Torruk sent Rengrave against the kings, whose gathered warriors he slaughtered to show the consequences of defying him. 2 of the original 14 kings remained defiant: King Threndiodax, whom Lord Captain Rengrave had served as a vassal in life, and King Morcraig, who fled to his castle thinking he could defend himself against the dragon. Both were soon annihilated and their souls subjected to endless torment, while the 12 who bowed to Torruk and surrendered had their mortal forms shattered and remade by the Dragonfather. They were rewarded with immortality as liches, bound to serve as the overlords of Torruk's new empire. The domains of the Lich Lords have evolved over time. Even as Torruk spread his blight across the islands, his new generals and acolytes set about transforming this scattered land of 14 petty fiefdoms into a single kingdom sworn to their dragon god. The last 16 centuries have taken their toll upon the Lich Lords. Fewer than half of the original 12 actually remain. Some have fallen to outside forces, while others had succumbed to scheming subordinates, their mantles taken up by those who had engineered their downfall. Such calculated betrayal is routine in Cryx, where only those brilliant enough and strong enough to retain their positions truly survive. Torruk's commandments, however, forbid the Lich Lords from openly warring with one another, as the pirate kings had once did in life, as direct strife would interfere with the great work of finding and delivering up his progeny. Within the last 30 years, the Dragonfather's schemes reached a critical point, and Cryxian forces began to swarm the mainland in unprecedented concentrations. These armies, called incursions, were once the responsibility of Lich Lords de Mortis and Terminus, who orchestrated their efforts from a distance, remaining with the fleets themselves. What mainlanders refer to as the Scarred Invasions of 584 to 588 was planned by these 2 Lich Lords as a series of attacks on enemy shores to disguise the movements of incursions into the interior. Both Terminus and De Mortis relied heavily upon powerful vassals, such as subordinate Iron Liches, to direct the clandestine movements of these troops. The eldest and most successful of these was Asphyxius. This powerful figure was effectively considered by many in Cryx an actual 13th Lich Lord. After his triumph over De Mortis, Asphyxius replaced his old master and has now become the equal of Lich Lord Terminus. Both are now permanently positioned together as their incursion forces to advance Cryxian interests. Venethrax, the Lich Lord who charged with acquiring Dragonic lore and the undisputed authority on Torruk's children and Dragonic blight, has also taken a more active role, directing mainland operations related to finding and securing other dragons of Torruk. His investigations would ultimately lead to Torruk's clash with his progeny over the Wormwall Mountains. These 3 Lich Lords are presently commanding generals of the Dragon Lord's armies conducting operations across the continent. A 4th military leader, Lich Lord Scopulus, commands the Cryxian armies kept in reserve. He supports the incursions on the mainland with his sizable stockpile of thralls, weapons, and necrotite. Scopulus also controls the Nightmare Empire's garrisons and fortresses and ensures their readiness against counterattacks, such as when the Signarans retaliated in the aftermath of the Scarred invasions. He coordinates his efforts with those of Terminus's fleets to guarantee a steady stream of reinforcements reach the mainland. Asphyxius's measures to construct mainland production facilities have mitigated the urgency of this resupply, however. It has been 4 centuries since the armies of Cryx last marched to war at full strength. They mustered against the Orgoth in the invaders' final bastion of Dur Darkenrung on Galagast Island. At the height of the conflict, Orgoth war witches obliterated the city. This conflagration destroyed 3 of the Lich Lords and reduced 2 others, Teneborus and Fomenus, to spectral shadows. Though their physical potency was diminished, their new state heightened their ability to perceive and manipulate necromantic powers, and they now serve as the Dragonfather's reigning experts on occult lore and esoteric experiments. As Orgoth's secrets became part of Cryxian occult knowledge, Torruk elevated new Lich Lords to replace the fallen. Terminus, Thalasina, and Angorius. Thalasina was tasked with steering matters regarding the human kingdoms and other potential rival powers to complement Malithrax's intelligence gathering. Few mortals could fathom the full extent of their sway when these Lich Lords work in tandem. Their prescience and subtle scheming have made them 2 of the most influential beings in Western Immoren. Torruk's dragonic mind has difficulty distinguishing the petty lives of mortal rulers, given that they die and are replaced so frequently, and he therefore relies upon Malithrax, Thalasina, and the agents who report to them. Of the Lich Lords residing in Skell, Angoras and Divinius oversee the treasury and Torruk's cults respectively, and rarely leave the city. Angoras' agents collects tithes taken from the pirate fleet and the mortal inhabitants of Cryx, and he oversees the tribulations of other significant resources, such as accumulated necrotite. Divinitus spends more time in Torruk's presence than perhaps any other Lich Lord, directing the Dragonfather's enigmatic priesthood. Lich Lord Corpio controls the Archive of Skell, a library of inestimable worth that includes a treasure trove of stolen and accumulated lore, including many tomes thought lost forever by those on the mainland. What the archive contains on the Orgoth in particular is beyond compare. It also preserves voluminous documents transcribing discoveries and insights arising from the works of other Lich Lords, such as Fulmendus, Teneborus, and Venithrax. Corpio's peers must stay in his good graces if they desire access to this information. Lich Lord Malithrax has been notably reluctant to contribute to the archives, hoarding his gathered intel and doling on it frugally. Up until recently, Cryxian military production was overseen by one of the original Lich Lords, Morbus. He went to the mainland in 608 to take control of the vast necrofactorums established by Asphyxius and to ensure that Venithrax received what he needed for vital missions to come. However, Morbus was destroyed by the Signaran army in an ambush under what many Lich Lords consider questionable circumstances. Terminus suspects Asphyxius' involvement, but failed to prove that he took part in any such conspiracy. There have been 12 Lich Lords since the founding of Cryx, and all in the upper echelons await Torruk's announcement of a replacement, though no one knows whom he will select for the 12th seat. As yet, no great undead lord has been singled out by the Dragonfather for elevation to the position. In the meantime, Asphyxius has assumed responsibility for Morbus' domain, though some in the necrofactorums in Skell have been co-opted by Scopulus to better consolidate the strength of his reserve army. Hierarchy of the Dead. The hierarchy of Cryx is a simple pyramid with Lord Torruk at its apex. Below him are the Lich Lords, each a relative monarch with near absolute authority over his or her respective domain. Mighty as they are, all are terrified of the dragonfather. Serving the Lich Lords in various capacities are powerful field commanders and overseers, as varied as they are resourceful. Iron Liches, necromancers, elder wraiths, and other stranger vassals. The individuals at this level enjoy tremendous latitude, and many put into motion complicated schemes to advance their own ambitions. The most effective and ruthless of the undead have sometimes risen to become Lich Lords themselves, a common aspiration for many of Cryx's subordinate leaders. Remaining Lich Lords are ever watchful of their underlings, knowing inattention can all too quickly lead to their own displacement. All leadership in Cryx is rooted in the skillful application of intimidation, violence, and fear. Warcasters of Cryx, both living and undead, invariably achieve special prominence by virtue of their invaluable talents as battlefield leaders. They transcend the ordinary limits of station to command larger forces, commiserated to their strength and cunning. Their stature can sometimes make them willful and unpredictable. However, their superiors rarely seek to quash this spark entirely, for it is also vital to their battlefield success. The other more influential vassals are those warlords who have risen through their ranks with their wits, prowess, and personal power. Some, like the Trollkin warlord Girax Slaughterborn, the human necromancer Dark Wraith, and the Styx pirates Scar Ravenmane and Asrixia Wraithblade, are living champions who have proven themselves in countless conflicts. Others, like Banelord Tartarus and Captain Raidengrave of the Archimenius, are particularly powerful souls bound into eternal service to use their unique abilities and command specific undead forces. Although the vast majority of Cryxian forces consists of thralls and necromechanical horrors, the nation also fields a host of fearsome living soldiers. The only two mortal groups who are accorded any real respect by their masters are the Styx and war witches. The Styxes were blighted over a millennia ago by the blood of the dragon Sakish, which rained down on their island while Lord Torruk consumed its attack. The people of Styx were already immersed in a culture of sacrifice and blood ritual when the blight fell upon them. The men withered away, but the women were transformed, their minds embracing an even greater cruelty. When the dragonfather appeared to the survivors, their queen immediately prostrated herself before their new god. The Styxes have since served Torruk as consummate reaver witches and raiders. The Orgoth annihilated themselves when Torruk's armies marched upon the city of Darkenrun, but not all as completely as they hoped. A handful of war witches survived and were captured. Given the choice of cooperating or having their secrets ripped from their bones, the survivors shared their occult traditions with Cryx. Within a few centuries, what little remained of Orgoth culture had been subsumed by Cryx, and this new war witch tradition has produced some of the most powerful mortals ever to serve the Nightmare Empire.